All right, New York Giants fans, it is finally 2024 NFL Draft Day, and we are just a few hours away from figuring out what the New York Giants will do in round one. Will they get a quarterback? Will they get a receiver? Will they trade up, trade down? Who should the targets be? We'll know in a few hours exactly what they're going to do. But here on the Big Blue View YouTube channel, we're going to chat about all the possibilities for a little while. And I've got the I've got the whole crew today. I've got Chris Pflum, I've got Nick Falato, I've got Tony DelGenio, so that you guys don't have to just listen to me. So we'll argue, we'll chat, we'll discuss. Maybe an hour from now or so, we'll all still be friends and we'll all still want to work together. We'll see how this goes. Guys, thank you. Thank you for hopping on. Thank you for all the work that you've done. I think we've done fantastic work over the last few months, and I thank you guys for all of that.
Oh, thank you.
So
we appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. So guys, let me start with this. Chris, what are you up to? 111 after today? 111 profiles?
I believe so. I think that's the final count. Although I gotta say that the quarterback deep dives I've been doing, I count those as about 3 or 4 total because of just the amount of time that goes into them.
So we say 115.
Yeah,
thereabouts. You're insane, and we appreciate it, and the Big Blue View audience appreciates it. So hopefully everybody goes, and hopefully we don't have one of those deals like we had a couple of years ago where we have no profiles on the guys that Joe Shane decides to select.
I'm looking forward to the punter from Northwest South State.
Fidarius, whatever that guy's name is, the defensive tackle that the Giants had a top 30 visit. He'll be, 4th or 5th round.
Yeah.
So there you go. But all right, let's get into it. Let me start with this, guys. And you guys can jump in, as you see fit here. Are you in or out on the Giants making the mega trade up to 3 to go get Drake May? I will start with this quickly. If that's what Joe Shane and Brian Daboll want to do, if Drake May is their guy, for me, it doesn't matter what I think of May or McCarthy or whatever. If he's their guy, then by all means go get him. As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think it really would depend on what a mega trade is. I've seen speculation that maybe it's 3 first-round picks plus, that the Patriots are absolutely sold on Drake May and Jaden Daniels, and they will dance a jig to turn in their draft card, whichever one is there. That would be tough. I think it would also, for me, depend on what the Giants thought of the other quarterbacks in the draft. Now, I know there are plenty of people who disagree with me, but I believe that pretty much everyone after Caleb Williams, it's really kind of an eye of the beholder type situation where they are all close enough that it's an individual team's perspective, the type of scheme they want to run, their situation that would determine their draft order. Like Matt Waldman has Bo Nix as his 3rd quarterback, and he said the only reason he doesn't have him as his 2nd quarterback is he has questions about Nix's arm strength. Ian Cummings over at Pro Football Network has Drake May as his top quarterback, his number 1 player in the draft. So if you are that in on Drake May, if you think Drake May is the guy to come out of this draft, you think he will be the best player to come out of this draft, and you believe that that is the game changer the Giants need, that it doesn't matter what is around the quarterback, you need to change the foundation of the franchise to change the direction of the franchise, then that mega deal might just be what you have to do. Otherwise, you might never get the chance to make that deal and somebody else will.
So I'm of the camp that you make the trade if the trade is appropriate, right? I don't want the Giants. I want the Giants to exercise game theory here and understand the Patriots are going to try to leverage this situation as best as possible. And it depends on what the Patriots want as well, because the other teams that are picking, or in theory, the teams that want to move up to get a quarterback, they're all picking after 10. The Giants are not. So if the Patriots, and this is where you really got to deep dive, you got to know what the Patriots want. If they want one of those receivers, or if they want JJ McCarthy, if they want a player who will more than likely not be there at 10, then Joe Schoen needs to be weary of giving up too much to trade up to 3. With that said, though, I'm of the mindset that Joe Schoen, Brian Dable, you're not going to be picking this high. If you are, you're probably not going to have a job, especially Brian Dable. So if you can trade 2 2s and a 3, or maybe a little bit more to jump up the 3 and secure your guy in Drake May, I'm of the camp that he could be that guy. I think he actually has top 5 talent. There are definitely aspects of his game that have to be ironed out. I've talked about that.
I was going to say, Tony, before you weigh in, I just have to point out, Nick, your stash is already drawing comments, but I have to chide the audience. Nobody's commented on the little thing going on with your hair there yet. Nobody's commented on that yet. So come on, people.
It's just some curls, man. My hair tends to curl up a little bit. I don't know. I don't use the blow dryer. I take showers and my hair curls up. It's what I've dealt with my entire life, Mr. Ed Valentine.
Oh,
but I am.
Sorry.
No, you're good, man.
I had to go there. Tony, please bring us back to reality here.
Okay, so I think what it comes down to me about is, what do I think of the GM and head coach? And I've decided, for better or for worse, that I believe in Joe Schoen, and that I believe in Brian Dable. And if they feel they need to go up and get a quarterback, well, it's not something I'd love to see, but I'll go for it if that's what they think they need to do. What I will say about Joe Schoen before the draft begins is, props to him. Nobody has any idea what the Giants actually are going to try to do, and good for him. You think back to 2018 when Dave Gettleman basically turned in the pick at number 2 before the draft even started. All right, this time we really don't know what they want and what they're going to do. And so if they want to move up, that's fine, as long as people understand that if they do get someone like Drake May, he's probably going to have to sit for a while and learn to do some things that he hasn't done well in college. He's got to, there's footwork work that has to be done with him, and other stuff, because he's just, once he gets past the short throws into the intermediate parts of the field, he's just not that good a passer right now. And Chris and Nick can say more about his pros and cons than I can, but I don't think he's a guy who can step on the field on day one. So you have to be patient with him, and probably anyone else that they're going to draft. And if that's what they think they need to do, then I'm with them.
It's let me say this quickly, Chris. Just
go ahead.
Tony's right. Props to Joe Schoen, because I tend to look at, not only talk to the people that I talk to, as much as I can, but I tend to look at all of the insiders and to kind of find the trends, as we get closer and closer. And you've got Pete Schrager banging the JJ McCarthy drum. You've got Daniel Jeremiah, saying no way the Giants go for McCarthy. You've got insiders all over the place, and I love it. I mean, that's a great thing for Joe Schoen. God knows the one thing you don't want is to watch the 2 guys you wanted go off the board and then wind up with Eli Apple. So, Chris, with that said, you wanted to make a point, Chris.
Yeah, actually, I have 2 of them, but I'll start with, Tony brought up 2018, and that's something that's kind of been resonating with me today, is just how similar 2024 is to 2018. You look back in 2016, the Giants had a rookie head coach who unexpectedly made the playoffs. They had an offense that did just enough to win in the fourth quarter, a defense that was better than people thought it was going to be, and made just enough stops for them to win. And they had a surprisingly good showing in the playoffs. That game against the Packers, the first half, the Giants were outplaying the Packers. It wasn't until DRC went down that things kind of went sideways and the Packers were able to exploit their lack of depth. That following offseason, the Giants went and signed Brandon Marshall. They signed Kyle Rudolph at the time. They went out and got some veteran skill position players to fill in some holes on their roster. And then 2017 happened. They had position groups wiped out by injury. They're Brandon Marshall, Odell Beckham, Sterling Shepard, their entire their entire receiving core was gone. Evan Ingram was their only real receiver left. And we saw what happened in the 2018 draft. The Giants were sitting there in a very strong quarterback draft with a very high pick, and they had to choose between a quarterback to set the stage to move on from Eli Manning or a dynamic offensive player in Saquon Barkley. Now, we know what happened. It turned out that the Giants could have drafted Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, but they went with Saquon Barkley. And we have since seen how that turned out. And the football gods have seen fit to make history rhyme. It might not repeat itself, but like Mark Twain says, it rhymes. And here we are again.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, and I honestly tend to think that there isn't really a wrong answer here. At 6, there isn't really a wrong answer. But what I want to throw out for you guys in the Drake May discussion, we've been talking about, a couple of you guys raised price tag. I want to talk about what Brandon Beane did in Buffalo when he got Josh Allen. He traded up twice from the mid-20s to get to number 7. And he got heavily criticized for that and for making that pick. And his response this year at the Combine when he was asked about that was basically, whatever the price was, the price was. We wanted Josh Allen, and if it didn't work, I was going to get fired. I was convinced that Josh Allen was the right guy. If it didn't work, I was going to get fired. And I also think about Ernie Accorsi and Eli Manning, 2004 when he makes the Manning trade. If you go back and you look at the 2005 draft for the Giants, making that trade left the Giants with 4 picks the next year. But the price was worth it because they got 2 Super Bowls out of it. It's not about 2024. It's about what you're building for 2020. To be honest with you, 2024 is a Daniel Jones transitional year if you draft a quarterback. And 2024 doesn't really matter all that much. You want to build the wide receivers as much as you can and build weapons. But if you're going all in on a quarterback, to me, the price doesn't matter, because nobody cares what the price tag is if you get it right. And if you get it wrong, you get fired and somebody else has to pick up the pieces.
The sheer fact that 3 of the 4 picks that they selected were absolute home runs in 2005 really helps.
That was a hell of a draft.
Yep, absolutely.
Corey Webster, Brandon Jacobs, and Justin Tuck. And I think Eric Moore, he was like a rotational guy, was the 4th. So being efficient with your selections is something the Giants have struggled with basically since that time period. So if we can get back onto that wagon, that would really help us with trading picks to go and get our actual franchise.
So what you're saying is Jerry Reese needs to come back and start setting the draft board again.
Yes, of course. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Oh God, please don't bring me into a Jerry Reese discussion. Please don't do that.
Wasn't Dave Gettleman in that front office as well? Let's bring him back too.
Yes, Gettleman was in that front office. Yeah. Jerry was in that front office.
The other thing I would say is that Brandon Beane did not actually give up all that much to go up and get Josh Allen. And so, he whatever he did behind the scenes to make that happen, it was pretty good. I believe he did not give up a first-round draft pick in order to move up.
Well, other than the 2 first-round draft picks that he gave up, that their natural one, the one they moved to, and then that one. But also they did give up Cordy Glenn. So they're starting left tackle.
Yeah.
I don't know if Giants fans would not riot if Joe Shane traded Andrew Thomas.
There was a big difference though between Andrew Thomas and Cordy,
right?
A massive. And Cordy Glenn was a respectable tackle, but Andrew Thomas is top 5 at less than 26 years old.
But as Chris indicated, their big move was earlier, going up from I think it was 27 to 12 or something like that.
Yes,
and that might have been that might have been the one that they had given up at first. But then once they were at 12, they went up 5 places to 7 without giving up all that much to, I think it was the Saints or something like that. So a lot to if you're giving up 3 firsts, like Chris was alluding to earlier, that's a hard one to swallow. So really the question is what the price is and what kind of bargain they're going to drive, and let's face it depends on what they think of May versus McCarthy also, and who knows what to make of that.
And I wanted to get into, Tony, I wanted to get to the JJ McCarthy discussion next, because we have to begin to get into what happens if the Giants don't get 3. But before we even get to McCarthy, though, I want to throw this out. I was thinking about this. Diana Rossini of The Athletic reported or said on the Athletic Football Show the other day that her information is that Joe Shane wants to put that big offer in front of the Patriots to go get Drake May. Whether the Patriots would accept that or not is one thing. Whether the Vikings would make a bigger offer is another thing. I personally think the Patriots are just going to sit there and make that pick. What would bother me is what Rossini reported, that Giants ownership might be standing in the way of even making that offer. And I'll tell you guys why it would bother me, and then you guys can have at it. Look, you can say that Joe Shane, put his marker down on Daniel Jones as their quarterback, and maybe he did, maybe he didn't. There's 2 years of guaranteed money in that deal, 1 year left, whatever. For me, it's the Brandon Beane situation. If the Giants make that move up, if they give up that price tag, whatever the price tag is, and Drake May bombs, 2 years from now, Joe Shane and Brian Daboll get fired, and it's somebody else's problem to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. If Giants ownership says, no, you can't make that move and go get the guy that you really want to build your franchise around, and they don't solve the quarterback problem, and they're bad for the next 2 years, Joe Shane and Brian Daboll are getting fired anyway. So for me, if your GM and your head coach, who you gave the green light to go get a quarterback, says this is the guy we want, and unfortunately this is what we have to do to go get him. If your ownership, you can't be fair to those guys and stand in the way.
Yeah, that would be a problem for me as well. And the Giants would have to work like hell to make sure that did not get out, that the decision to not make the big move, not even make the big offer and make the Patriots say no, or drive up the price for the Vikings. And then maybe if you feel similarly about JJ McCarthy or whatever, and make the offer to the Cardinals or the Chargers. Yeah. If ownership says no, I think a big part of hiring somebody to do a job is to trust them to do the job, to not say, hey, I believe in you to run the shop, to build my football team, but I don't believe in you that much. Then, what is Joe Shane? What is he even doing there? If John Mara wants to be Jerry Jones, then be Jerry Jones.
Let's not be Jerry Jones.
No, let's not. Please.
Although I have to say, even Jerry Jones is smart enough to rely on Will McClay.
Or by the way, as a complete aside, guys, are we enjoying the Dallas Cowboys all in off season?
Oh, absolutely. I love them talking to Zeke.
That would be a nice reunion. Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's a good point. I try to put myself in John Mara's shoes, and I can't relate to John Mara for many reasons. But I'll say this: look, he has to be aware at this point of Daniel Jones's injuries. He knows that there was a 2-year out in his contract, and I'm sure John Mara does not want to be picking in the top 10 yet again for the millionth time in 10 years, if that's even possible. So for those reasons, like, I understand the Rossini report in theory, but I don't think he's going to stand in the way, unless it would be like an astronomical trade, which I don't think Joe Schoen would do anyways, because Joe Schoen isn't a desperate general manager. Joe Schoen has contingency plans in place. And if the Patriots are asking for too much, I don't think Joe Schoen is going to just give it all to him. I think there's going to be a lot of game theory in that trade.
Tony?
And that's why it comes back to whether May is the guy for them, yes, or whether May is one of several possible guys for them. And if May and McCarthy are both in play, then, as Nick indicates, you have more leverage. You don't have to just give them what they want necessarily. You have other options you can explore.
All right, let's have the McCarthy discussion. All right. A month ago, it seemed like the drumbeat was McCarthy to the Giants all the time. That's kind of died down a little bit. JJ McCarthy went on the Rich Eisen show yesterday, and he said, I think he basically said, I've talked to the Giants more than any other team. And, when Eisen said, do you have an idea where you're going to go? The first thing out of his mouth was New York Giants. So so the Giants don't get May. They can't make the trade up. May gets taken. How would you guys feel if the choice was JJ McCarthy?
I guess I'll lead off.
Yeah,
I want to jump in. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, sure. I said a while ago I'd be cautiously optimistic. I don't know JJ McCarthy's ceiling. Look, he played on a stud offense, and I don't want to hold that against him. I had a perception of him going into the film. And when I watched the tape, I liked the tape. I did not think it was nearly as bad as some people were making it out to be. I think a lot of people were lazy, just being like, oh, he has this great team and he threw the ball 8 times in some games, so he's just a game manager. He sucks. And I thought that was very unfair. With that said, I still think there are deep ball accuracy concerns, and there are some arm talent concerns that he still needs to overcome. Like when you juxtapose him next to Drake May to me has such a higher ceiling and a lot better, more crisp arm talent with higher level throws over the middle of the field. I think JJ McCarthy has a great fastball. He has a lot of zip and velocity. He doesn't really have a curveball yet, doesn't really have that changeup. He needs to develop those pitches in his arsenal. And if he does that, I think you can maybe start to access a ceiling that would make me intrigued at pick 6. He's still only 21 years old. I love the makeup. I think he's more creative in the pocket and has more creative throws in terms of when he is on the run, contorting his body, changing his arm angles, and doing things of that nature, then he gets credit for. So cautiously optimistic would be the way I describe it, but I wouldn't be as excited. I wouldn't be as excited like I would be if it was Drake May, because I think that I already see that ceiling to be possibly a top 5 quarterback in Drake May. I don't necessarily see that with McCarthy just yet.
Yeah, I think the thing with May and McCarthy is that they need similar amounts of work, just in different areas of their game. Tony mentioned Drake May's footwork, and yeah, his footwork is sometimes an absolute mess. Like, he does not take a normal drop. He just kind of shuffles backwards and then starts playing backyard football. And it's just that his arm is such that it works. I can't remember if I included this in my deep dive on him or just really hard, but I think he was a tailor in a past life, because he never saw a needle he didn't try to thread on tape. And JJ McCarthy,
it sounds like you've used that line before, Chris.
I probably have, because I do like it. And also I figured, saying he was a seamstress in a past life, that
would not have gone well.
Yeah, that wouldn't have landed the same. But with JJ McCarthy, he is I think, more technically polished with his footwork. He does have a more repeatable throwing motion. And Nick's right. He's a fastball pitcher, and he does have a problem overstriding when he's throwing to his left. But I think he's a good enough athlete. He's a fantastic athlete that's fixable. Like, you could, if he sits and works, I don't think that's any less fixable than Drake May's footwork, dropping from under center, let's say. I think what I really like the most about JJ McCarthy is his field vision and his processing speed. I saw plays on the All-22 where you could see his head just kind of between 3 or 4 reads, and it went so fast it looked like he was executing an RPO. It looked like it was a one-man read, but he was checking 3 or 4 different guys. And he has an elite running back's vision, and that helps him as a runner, because he measured in at 4 pounds lighter than Drake May. I'm not sure if that's what he would play at, but he doesn't take big hits because he sees those guys coming. Like, he anticipates the second and third level defenders. And I also see that in his passing. Yes, he occasionally overlooks guys in coverage. So do most young quarterbacks. Yeah, I think Drake May, I think his ceiling is kind of Joe Burrow. With JJ McCarthy, maybe he's more of a young Aaron Rodgers. But either way, that's a damn good quarterback.
Yeah, I look at, just real quickly, I look at Drake May, and I wonder if the ceiling is a guy like Kirk Cousins or Matt Ryan with mobility. And if it's that, if he gets to that level, you can win with that. That's, I've just been wondering about that the last couple of days. Tony, you haven't had a chance to weigh in on this one yet. Since you started this mess with McCarthy, it's about time we got to you.
Okay. So I mean, I'm pretty much in agreement with what Nick and Chris are saying there. Nick, I think, said cautiously optimistic, right? And so it's tough for me. So I don't analyze all 22, and so I have to take what Nick and Chris say about him as my best information. I do watch games though live on TV, and it's frustrating to just do that and analyze JJ McCarthy, because in so many of the games they're not asking him to do all that much, and so you're not seeing everything he might be capable. I mean, what Chris said, he's got a great fastball. I don't know about the curveball and the changeup, and that's the one thing that you see. Everything that he throws is really zinged downfield. And I think about that touchdown pass in the Ohio State game that he zipped in between the 2 defenders, and that's, like, to me, that's sort of like the typical JJ McCarthy pass. Yeah. What you don't see is him kind of like, more gently kind of layering the ball over defenders into the intermediate area to get somebody in stride for a lot of yak and stuff like that. At least that's my impression, the few times I've watched him. And so you'd hope that that's something that they can develop. He also takes a knock for not having as strong an arm as some of the other quarterbacks in this draft. I don't know that bothers me all that much. I think I'm more the deep throws are great. I mean, there's nothing like watching Justin Herbert, like that pass that Herbert completed against the Giants a few years ago, where he threw it over 60 yards to
Guyton. That was crazy.
With the 2 safeties, before halftime. I mean, you love to have a quarterback who can do that, but I don't think those passes are the main things that win games. I think that the main things that win games are the 10 to 20 yard passes where you can catch guys in stride open and allow them to get yards after catch. And that's I think the bread and butter of good passing offenses today. And so if he can show that he's adept at that type of passing and doing it in more ways than just throwing it as fast as he can, then I think he can be a very good quarterback in this league.
One
It's
thing real
interesting
quick,
with
Ed.
go ahead, Nick. Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in. Something that Drake May and JJ McCarthy do possess that the New York Giants have lacked at the quarterback position is the gumption and the anticipatory throwing. Like, I absolutely love watching JJ McCarthy and Drake May anticipate throws over the middle of the field, and they have the confidence in themselves to actually pull the trigger. I think that's been one of the things that the New York Giants quarterback position has lacked for quite a while right now. So just having that trait and that confidence in themselves and their arm strength and their ability to process what the defense is doing relative to the routes that their offensive teammates are running, that's something I desperately want from a quarterback. And I think both of these quarterbacks have shown that at the college level, at least.
I was going to say, in regards to McCarthy, I don't watch the depth of film that Chris and Nick do either. I watch some. When I was watching JJ McCarthy, you obviously worry about the volume. You obviously wonder about the fact that he's never been asked. He's never walked into a game where Jim Harbaugh said JJ McCarthy has to win this game from the first snap. We have to put the game in his hands, and we're going to throw it 40 times, and he has to do that. But when I watched McCarthy, I kept coming back to, man, that's an NFL throw. That's another NFL throw. That's another NFL throw. There was a ball that he threw. I think it was against Ohio State. Nick, you talked about anticipatory throws. There was a ball he threw. I think it was the play. It might have been Roman Wilson, who ended up getting tackled at the 1 yard line, where he dropped this ball in between two Ohio State defenders who were all over Roman Wilson, but he dropped this ball right in a little tiny window. And my first thought was, that's a fantastic NFL throw. And my second thought was, Daniel Jones would never have let that ball go. So I don't know. I see a lot of those, and people question his accuracy at times too. But I also see on a lot of these crossing routes, on a lot of these underneath throws, I see balls that are perfectly placed that let guys run after catch quite a bit. And I like that.
Chris can speak to this as well. There was two very similar throws on his tape, just like that Ohio State one that everyone talks about. There was one against Indiana and there was one against UNLV. And he also had a drag against Alabama that was somewhat similar, but it's just highly congested areas. He will attack those areas. And to your point, yes, Ed, I think it's very accurate. It's very astute. And I think the New York Giants, I think if you want to win in the league, you need a quarterback who at least has that type of mentality.
And there was one other one. I believe it was against Minnesota, if I remember correctly. It might have been against Indiana, where McCarthy was being blitzed, and he had pressure from either side, and he had a free runner in his face. He navigated the pocket just enough to get himself a good sight line, and I believe it was Roman Wilson down the field, and he steps up, makes the throw, and then gets clobbered. But the throw was right on line, and it was a walk-in touchdown. It basically hit the receiver in the hands. And that is occasionally the type of throw you need a pro quarterback to make, where you are throwing into the teeth of a blitz, where you just know that one runner is your responsibility. You do not have enough guys to pick him up. So you need to get that ball out. And you either need to throw it away so you don't lose yardage, or you need to pick up the first down. And that's not exactly a highlight reel tape, because highlight reels generally don't show the quarterback getting clobbered, but that is the kind of play you need to win a game. And I have seen enough of those from all of these quarterbacks that's part of the reason why I keep comparing this to the 2020 class, where each of the top 5 quarterbacks all hit.
All right. Hey, I want to throw this one out. We're still talking about McCarthy a little bit. I was kind of running through draft scenarios in my head this morning, and I think the first 4 picks, my gut feeling is they're going to go chalk. And let's just say they go chalk. Williams goes to the Bears. Jaden Daniels goes to the Commanders. Drake May goes to New England. And then at 4, Arizona sits there and takes Marvin Harrison Jr. Then to me, it gets really interesting at 5, because I think the Chargers are a team that would really like to trade out. I think so. So here you are, you're the Giants. JJ McCarthy still on the board. You've got Nabers and Odunze. You know, if you want to go in that direction, you've probably got Minnesota circling around trying to get that pick from the Chargers. Would you make a move up to 5? I mean, Joe made the move last year to get Tay Banks. We've seen he's willing to do that. He went and got Jalen Hyatt. Would you make a move? And it would be a smaller move. It wouldn't cost you as much as, you know, going up to 3. Would you make a move up to 5 for JJ McCarthy? I'm wondering if Joe would actually do that in that scenario. Would you make a move up for McCarthy, or would you sit there and see if he lands at 6 and even pass on him at 6 and take a receiver, which we've got to get to that eventually too.
You know, well, I think that if the price is reasonable, you absolutely make that move up 1 to do it, and you shouldn't have to pay as much, right, to go up 1, because if the Chargers have someone in mind, and we have no idea what they're thinking, right? I mean, I think they'd be crazy not to take one of the big wide receivers, because they really have nothing in their wide receiver room right now after getting rid of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams going away too. So assuming that 2 of the wide receivers are left, then they've got to know that they can get one of those 2 receivers at number 6. Right. And so there's no reason for them not to want to move down and get a couple of extra draft picks, or an extra draft pick or whatever in the bargain. At the same time, the Giants have to know that there's the chance that Minnesota will try to move up with them also. But the disadvantage of Minnesota moving up is that it moves the Chargers down to number 11, where those wide receivers are likely to be gone by that time. So I think it could be a very natural and maybe reasonable deal between those 2 teams. And I would do that again if the Giants have decided that they think JJ McCarthy can be the guy.
Yeah, I tend to think that part of the reason why the Giants have spent so much time with JJ McCarthy is they're trying to figure out that question themselves. You know, like we've talked about just, you know, how low a volume a passer he was on tape. And that is definitely a confounding factor. Now, I did like that when Michigan did turn to him, it was in big situations. You know, it was in 3rd and long when their running game failed. And so they had to rely on McCarthy to keep the drive alive, more or less. I came out of his tape thinking I would be comfortable with JJ McCarthy at 6. So it would depend on what the price is, what the asking price is. You know, if it is that 3rd round pick and, you know, maybe some future consideration, 2025 pick, whatever, then yeah, I would make that trade. If you could get away with maybe even Darius Slayton and a future pick, something like that, and then the Chargers would have a wide receiver, an experienced wide receiver, and maybe they could turn around and get Joe Alt or Olu Fashanu or Talise Fuaga, one of the top 3 tackles, because, you know, this is Jim Harbaugh we're talking about, and he was the architect of that Michigan offense. So yeah, I think just swapping picks would be pretty attractive. Dropping down to 11 or 12 with the Broncos, the wide receivers are going to be gone. The top tackle, maybe even the top 2 tackles, are going to be gone. Yeah, that is, you might get more bites of the apple, but the guys you are targeting probably won't be there.
Yeah, I think Tony and Chris nailed this, Ed. I don't really want to trade up in that specific scenario, but it really doesn't matter what I think. It really comes down to what the New York Giants think of JJ McCarthy, how he's doing in the meeting rooms, and if they believe he can be a franchise guy. And if they can, then you do make that trade. I just don't have that information because it's not something that I can see on the tape.
Yeah, it's, for me, I'm with you there, Nick. And that's something that we all debate this, and we love to debate this. And, you know, commenters at Big Blue View love to throw in their 2 cents and say, I studied his film, which means I watched 2 clips on YouTube. But you know, what it comes down to is how the Giants feel about it. And for me, I always go back to the Big Blue View rules for draft success that I wrote. And look, part of that is don't get cute. If you like McCarthy, if you think he can be a franchise guy, you need a franchise guy. You need somebody to follow Daniel Jones. If you think he's the guy, even if Drake May was your number one choice, if you think McCarthy can fill that bill, don't get cute. Don't say, well, we'll take him at 6 if he's there. Go get him at 5 if you think he's the guy. And the other part of that is the whole, well, maybe we can get a quarterback later. We don't like those guys quite as much, but we can get one and say that we at least got a quarterback. For me, it's don't get cute. If you like McCarthy enough, just take McCarthy or May and figure out the rest of it later on.
Yeah,
anybody with a quick thought on that?
I would say don't get cute should be like inscribed in the GM's desk. I think that there are plenty of instances of decision makers, GMs, coaches, whatever, getting cute, outthinking themselves, and basically walking face first into a rake's Sideshow Bob style. Yeah, in my last mock draft, I had the Giants trade down, and I wound up taking Bo Nix, which some people felt some.
We're going to get to that, Chris. We're going to get to that.
I know.
We're going to get to that.
Yeah, I figured I'd tee you up there. But when I did that, I said, I'm getting cute with this. And I don't like that because it opens the door for the Broncos or the Raiders to jump up, or who knows, the Seahawks, the Saints, somebody like it. If you have a guy you like, just get him. Don't mess around. Don't settle. Just go get your guy, because what the price you give up, if you are right, it's not going to matter. Like just how we started this talking about Drake May.
And I'm gonna step on a rake here a little bit myself, Chris, before we get off this topic, because this is what I have said for years about Dave Gettleman choosing Daniel Jones at number 6. All right. There were people who said, oh, Daniel Jones is a 3rd-round talent. He's this, he's that. He shouldn't be drafted at number 6. The Giants also had the 17th pick, which turned into Dexter Lawrence. There were a lot of people who said, oh, Gettleman could have taken, a pass rusher at 6 and gotten Jones at 17. Well, we found out eventually that the Washington, I think they were Washington football team at the time, they probably would have taken Daniel Jones at 15, I think. But regardless, my point has always been it hasn't worked out the way that anyone would have liked it to work out, with Daniel Jones being the number 6 overall pick. But Dave Gettleman had the conviction that Jones was the guy that he wanted. And for me, he was absolutely right to spend the number 6 overall pick on Jones. It hasn't worked, but if you have that conviction, you take the swing. It's for me, it's something I've been writing and saying lately. And I even asked Joe Shane this the other day. Is it a bigger sin to swing and miss or not take the swing? And for me, it's a bigger sin not to take the swing.
I think it depends on your options.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Well, the way I phrased it is, look, if you need a quarterback, Nick, you love the guy that's there within your reach.
Yeah.
You pass on that quarterback. Okay. Doesn't matter who your other options are. You pass on that quarterback. You spend the next 3 or 4 years not able to fix that quarterback situation. The guy you loved and passed on becomes a great player. You want to live with that regret? I wouldn't.
No, I don't want to live with that regret. It always comes down to how much you love the quarterback option. But I think this conversation pertains to probably the next topic, and I don't want to segue us right now if we're not done with this, but if you love the option, because you have a lot of good wide receivers sitting there at 6, if you stay at 6, and the Giants have desperately tried to locate a prime pass catcher since they traded Odell Beckham Jr. So it really comes down to, how much do you love JJ McCarthy? How much do you want to trade up if we're talking about to get JJ McCarthy when you can get that number one pass catcher that has been so elusive for this franchise since 2018?
Absolutely. And I think we'll table going after Chris trading down for Bo Nix for a little bit. We'll table that one, and we'll talk about wide receiver because that is the option. If you like JJ McCarthy, if he's your option at 6, if he's there, if you like JJ McCarthy, but you also like Michael Penix, or you like Bo Nix, or you like Spencer Rattler, and you think you can get, one of those guys, do you take the wide receiver, and then get the quarterback later? I mean, that borders on getting cute. You're not necessarily trading assets down. That borders on getting cute. But Nick, you're absolutely right. That wide receiver 1, is such a huge need. And for me, I have such a hard time. I mean, I'm a Rome Odunze guy, and I have, and we can discuss that too. But that's so hard to pass on that number 1 wide receiver if you're not 100% convicted on the quarterback.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's made this difficult is that is the idea of taking a chance on one of the other quarterbacks, which I looked at in one of the pieces I wrote. It's gotten harder and harder to do that because the so-called second tier of quarterbacks in this draft. The problem with this is that as time has gone on, all these quarterbacks have just kind of risen toward the top. And, a few months ago, no one was talking about JJ McCarthy in the top 10. They were talking about him at the bottom of the first round or maybe the second round or something like that. Guys like Penix and Nix were certainly going to be second round guys. And now all of a sudden people are talking about them not only in the first round, but possibly even relatively high in the first round. And so, yeah, the options for maneuvering and getting both the wide receiver you want and the quarterback you want seem to be shrinking, if that's any indication of what the teams themselves are really thinking. But this is why I said at the very beginning of this broadcast, I'm tense going into this day, because I love all 3 of those wide receivers that are going to be there at the top of the draft. And I would be thrilled to see any of them on the Giants. They're different types of wide receivers, but oh God, would I love to see Marvin Harrison Jr. in blue, and Rome Odunze is a guy I like, and Nabers, of course, is probably the most explosive of them all. Any of those guys I'd be thrilled with to see as Giants, just that you'd still have the quarterback question there, and whether they could, quote unquote, solve that quarterback question in round 2 or trade back into late round 1 to try to solve it. We don't know. I won't feel terrible if they actually wind up doing that or trying to do that, because I'll know that they got a guy at the top of the draft that I think will probably be a great NFL player, most likely. But you do get nervous about it because the quarterback question looms over everything.
It really does. With respect to the wide receivers, the interesting thing about this draft is just how many really, really good wide receivers there are in this class. We've talked about, Marvin Harrison is kind of the dream. He probably won't make it past the Cardinals, but then you've got Odunze and Nabers. And I think that comes down to what kind of offense you want to run. If you want to run that catch and run, almost, I've been calling it the new West Coast, the Shanahan McVay style offense that's kind of percolated throughout the NFL. The Lions are doing something similar. Obviously, you've got Mike McDaniel with the Dolphins doing, the warp speed version of it. And I think that would be great for Nabers. However, you've got Odunze, who is kind of the classic Air Coryell X receiver. Just run down the field, body up some poor DB, and go catch that 50-50 ball. Like, that is my ball. It's kind of like Hakeem Nicks, but bigger. So I think that between those two players, if the Giants are out on quarterback, like they can't get Drake May, and they either get jumped for JJ McCarthy, or they're just not that into him. I think it would come down to what type of offense they want to run. But also then you look down, you've got Brian Thomas Jr., who has just a rare blend of size and athleticism. Troy Franklin, who I wish he caught the ball better, but Nick and I were talking about this just before one of our podcasts. He is an incredibly subtle route receiver and route runner and pretty sophisticated. Then you've got guys like Ladd McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Leggett, Keon Coleman. And it just kind of goes on and on and on with guys who they don't quite have all of the blue chip credentials that the top three have, but you're going to see starting receivers come out from that group. You're going to see number one receivers come out from that group, or at least receivers who can serve the number one function, because a lot of the top offenses in the league don't use a number one receiver anymore. You've got the Dolphins, who have the 1A, 1B. You got the 49ers with Ayuk, maybe, and Debo. The Ravens with, I suppose, Isaiah Likely, maybe, their tight end. The Lions with Amon Ra. And then you've got the Rams with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. All that in the top 10 offenses. Even the Cowboys with CeeDee Lamb. He's a slot receiver. Like, he spends most of his time in the slot. So there are just so many different ways to kind of run an offense nowadays that the options for wide receiver, I think, are very open for the Giants.
And then there's a totally different route that we haven't discussed yet, and that is Brandon Ayuk and T. Higgins, possibly.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not advocating for that necessarily, but Adam Schefter tweeted out that T. Higgins is looking for a trade. Brandon Ayuk, there's a lot of smoke around that. I don't know if the 49ers are looking to deal him, but there's a lot of smoke there. And if the Giants do go quarterback at 6, or if they do trade up and they have 47, say, if they'd only trade up one spot, do you trade 47 for one of those receivers and then just really try to maximize the quarterback rookie contract window that you're going to have with the quarterback that you bring in? With the Giants going out and trading for Brian Burns, with the Giants kind of having, at least a foundation in place to compete, that could be an option that the Giants are looking to exercise on and execute on to compete right away and try to turn this around very quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say, in regards to that option, it depends to me on whether or not they have to give up assets to go get the quarterback. All right. If they can make a small trade up to get the quarterback and they still have an asset or two that they're comfortable giving up to go get an Ayuk or a Higgins, fine. But, now you're going to play with the hair, Nick? Now you're going to play with the hair?
Ed, you're making a lot of comments on the hair. I just got to say, there's been low-hanging fruit here the entire time that I have not pounced upon, and I think everybody knows what I'm talking about.
I don't have any hair. What do you want me to do? I'm having fun with it. But no, back to that. I think it depends on what the Giants have left for assets. If they have an asset they're comfortable giving up, as much as it's a deep wide receiver class, sometimes it's better to grab something that you've already seen, especially for me in a T. Higgins, where you already know what he is instead of trying to project. The one thing that I did want to sort of disagree with Chris a little bit, I get the fact that it's a deep wide receiver class. I get the fact that in some cases you can scheme guys open, but I also think that some of those teams that you mentioned, those guys are wide receiver ones. Those guys, Tyreek Hill is a wide receiver one. Jaden Waddle is a wide receiver 1B. Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are wide receiver ones. They're better players than anybody that the Giants have. For me, I think Joe Shane said it the other day. you can get help at wide receiver. You can get a piece that helps you, on day 2, whether it's Brian Thomas or Keon Coleman or any of the guys, Malachi Corley, if you wanted to go there, Xavier Legette, whoever, you can get a guy that can help you. I don't think and maybe out of those 10 or 12 guys that are in that tier, there might be 1 or 2 that turn into a wide receiver 1. But I think that you look at Harrison, Odunze, and Nabers, and you think they're wide receiver 1s the minute they walk into the building. And when you look at what the Giants have, and Joe talked about it the other day with a quality slot receiver in Wan'Dale Robinson, who really started to come on at the end of last year, with a deep threat in Jalen Hyatt, another deep threat in Slayton, a decent big-bodied possession guy in Isaiah Hodgins. What they really need is a 1 who requires a double team. They need that 1 who requires attention, that guy that everybody has to identify where that player is, and that guy who can either take a ball to the house or make that 50-50 catch, that guy who's open when he's not open, is the way I like to put it. So it's a hard argument. I think if you're, for me, if you don't love the quarterback, at 6, if you're just not sure, then you take one of those guys because it makes a dramatic difference. And the other part of that is, and we've talked about it a little bit, what are the Giants putting on the field on offense? Yes, they've improved their offensive line, but Saquon Barkley wears a green uniform right now. Darren Waller is probably going to retire. So theoretically, this offense that wasn't good a year ago has gone backwards in terms of playmakers. So that's a big argument for wide receiver.
Yeah, I agree. They don't have a single impact player on offense right now. I mean, they have one excellent player, but he's a left tackle, not a skill player. Although Andrew Thomas did catch a touchdown pass against Tampa Bay, I guess, a couple of years ago, but I don't think he can rely on that in a regular sense, right?
Hey.
Yeah. Just one other point to make about the wide receivers is this also kind of filters back to the quarterback evaluation discussion a little bit too, because you think about Jaden Daniels and you think, how amazing is it that this guy had 2 guys to throw to this year who are going in the first round?
3. And
3.
Just to interject slightly, next year's wide receiver class is going to be very good. Kyron Lacey at LSU, their 3rd receiver, he was really good as well. I would say Tatoria McMillan out in Arizona, he's very good. Kobe Young, who's currently at Miami, he's transferring to Georgia, he's going to be good. And Luther Burden at Missouri he's going to be another guy we're going to be talking about a lot this time next year. Like, I wasn't even trying to scout wide receivers for 2025, and I had at least a handful of guys who just jumped off the tape at me. It was like, just remember us. So okay, back to your point, Tony. Sorry.
No. And so the question now, I was going to, and you look at JJ McCarthy in Michigan, right? And so Michigan had Roman Wilson, who's probably going to go, what did you say? I don't know, late 2nd, early 3rd, something. I don't know, something
that seems
something
fair.
like that. He's a good receiver, but not in the class of Nabers and Thomas, I don't think. At least it doesn't look that way coming out of college. And so if you took JJ McCarthy and put him on LSU and took Jaden Daniels and put him on Michigan, well, would those 2 teams have been running different offenses this year than what they actually ran? And so it's one of the things that makes it a little bit hard to evaluate these guys is that Jaden Daniels really had the ideal situation for any quarterback this season, and McCarthy really didn't. Plus, Michigan had excellence in the running game and on defense, and so they didn't need him to do that. And that's one of the things that, for me anyway, makes it tough to sort out these guys a little bit.
And
it's going to be hard to swallow on one of those big wide receivers at the top of round 1 if that's what happens tonight.
Let me throw this out. You guys have said I know, Chris, you talked about the difference between Nabers and Odunze. I have put my marker down on Odunze, and I think he just fits. I think he fits the Giants really well. And I have to be honest, as much as I see the explosion and I see the playmaking and I see all of that, I worry that Malik Nabers has the potential to not only be Odell Beckham on the field, but off the field. And that worries me because I walk around the Giants building and I see smart, tough, dependable signs all over the place. It's all over their auditorium, all of the things that they want from players. And I don't know that there's that much difference in talent, ability, whatever, between Nabers and Odunze. For me, just the way that I feel personally about Nabers, there's not enough difference in ability for me to take that risk. So I'm curious, Tony and Nick, really, given the choice between those two guys in a vacuum, it's just those two players, which one are you taking?
So I've thought about that too, and again, I don't do this systematically. I kind of watch college football games on Saturday afternoons as they come up, and I happen to be available to watch them. And it's just the luck of the draw that Washington was on a lot this year on TV at times that I was able to sit and watch them, and I just love Odunze. I think back to the big X receivers the Giants have had in the past, like Hakeem Nicks and guys like that. And I just say, oh boy, would I love to have another one of those things out there, to have a quarterback throw to. The other thing though that I just wanted to add is that we heard a couple of years ago when Joe Shane was being interviewed by someone, I think before his first draft, about how their big board only has something like 160 or 170 guys on it. And there are a lot of guys that we will never know about who get eliminated by them before the draft even begins for a variety of reasons. Some of them might be injury history. Others might be, as you say, off the field issues. And could this guy become a problem, and so on and so forth. And earlier, I think this week, Joe Shane was quoted as saying they have 15 first-round guys on their big board. And considering that there are 32 picks in the first round, that's a pretty small list of people that they think they could take in the first round. And so either that means they think there are only 15 guys who are talented enough, or it means that there are a bunch of guys they've taken off their board for reasons other than football skill. And you just wonder, how they're doing that and who might be on and off that list. And it's something to keep in mind when the pick comes around, and whether they, people will be surprised at someone they pick and someone that they pass up.
I wanted to say something quickly about that, Tony. I think that the Big Blue View big board is something good to refer to. You got to get the plug in, guys. Got to get that plug in. But that board is a 2-access board, and it's built the way NFL teams build their big boards. And I think that Joe saying that they have 15 players with first-round grades is fairly normal for an NFL team. He said they had 11 players with first-round grades last year. And what happens is, similar to what you see on our big board, there are players considered top 10 players. There are players considered pure first-round players. If he's a pure first-round player, you're expecting all 32 teams around the league would probably have this guy on their big board as a first-round player. What you end up seeing in the bottom half of round 1 into round 2, and sometimes even into round 3, I would venture to guess there were some teams that had Jalen Hyatt as a round 1, round 2 player last year. Guys who, and he fell to the 3rd round. Guys who, in the right situation, we think he's a first-round player. But he's somewhere in between, which is why when you start to get to the back half of round 1, you sometimes get surprised. Oh, I didn't think that guy was a round 1 player. Dane Brugler had him as a round 2 guy. Whatever. So I think they're the back half of round one. Jerry Reese used to say the max number of pure first round players in any draft, guys that everybody knows are going in the first round, is 20. So 15's not surprising, but to me anyway. But anyway, Nick, I don't think we have to circle back. I mean, if you want to comment on that, but we also want to circle back and get your take on Odunze versus Nabers.
So I have a higher grade on Malik Nabers, but I think it's not a substantially higher grade. And when I look at Rome Odunze, I think he complements what the New York Giants need a little bit more. I don't think the Giants have had this contested catch, big bodied X type of wide receiver for a while. They tried to do it with Kenny Galladay. Did not work. Didn't seem like he was healthy enough. I think the hip injury really hindered his ability to return to football. So judging by that, with everything that you guys said, which I think there is substance there, I really do, when it comes to who is going to fit the locker room a little bit better, who is going to be that leader that you need, who is going to be the face of the franchise that you just lost in Saquon Barkley. Everything kind of points to Rome Odunze. And I think his fit with this team in 11 personnel with Wandale and Jalen Hyatt and maybe Darius Slayton, it makes more sense from a stylistic standpoint because nobody has this Rome Odunze type of skill set on this New York Giants team if Darren Waller is not here. So for that reason, I am a little bit more comfortable going with Rome Odunze. If they choose Nabers and everything checks out with Nabers off the field and in the locker room and they think he could fit well, I'm not going to complain because I know his upside. I know his ceiling, and I know it's very high. But Rome Odunze also was a very good football player, and I don't think we should lose that reality, right? So I think ultimately, if you were to ask me, I would say Rome Odunze. But again, I do have a slightly higher grade just based off tape with Malik Nabers.
All right, let's get to what's probably going to be the final piece of what we talk about, and we might be doing this for a little while yet, but that's what did the Giants do about quarterback if they get beyond 6? If McCarthy's gone, if May's gone, if the big four's gone, they take the wide receiver, they take Odunze or Nabers. My gut instinct is they have to come out of this draft with at least a developmental option that they think has an opportunity to start in 2025, even if he winds up being a placeholder that can give them good enough play until they are in a position to go and get Arch Manning in a couple of years or whatever. But so with that said, Chris, we're coming back to you, buddy. Chris, in his mock draft, traded down and took Bo Nix at 12. I think it was 12, right, Chris?
11.
And 11. So it was 11 with Minnesota. Okay. And for me, that's just too high. I don't see it with Bo Nix. I don't see anything more than a mediocre placeholder starter in the NFL when it comes to Bo Nix. And I know you disagree. You've studied him in much more deeply than I have. I just with Nix, I'd be fine with it at 47, but I'm not fine with it. I'm not fine with Jimmy Garoppolo at 11. So let's talk about Bo Nix.
Okay. Let me see. Where should I start? Oh yeah. Well,
now shoot me down. Go for it.
All right. So with Bo Nix, I think the reason there are two factors with him. The first is a lot of people formed their opinions on him back in 2021. That last season at Auburn when he was doing everything he could to carry a very depleted team with a head coach that didn't like him, that just didn't want him there, wanted his guy that he recruited there, and then he got hurt. So people pretty much wrote Bo Nix off at that point. Then he goes to Oregon, basically succeeds Justin Herbert there. And Oregon had made the decision that they aren't going to change their offense up a whole lot. They wanted to run that quick passing, high speed, catch and run offense that Oregon runs. Like, that is just Oregon football right there. And at Auburn, Bo Nix was very much like Drake May or Caleb Williams. He was a run around, be an artist behind the line of scrimmage, and chuck the ball, try to make magic happen type player. Like, he's a great athlete. He has a bigger arm than he gets credit for. Like, at the combine, he threw the ball 58 miles an hour. Justin Herbert threw it 55. Like, the ball velocity is there. But then at Oregon, they tamped that down, and they basically taught him how to be a ball placement specialist and to take what the defense gives him, to take the check down, to throw the screen rather than go big play hunting. But the guy from Auburn is still there. There are still plays where you see him bail out on a bootleg, throw back across his body to the opposite numbers, which is pretty significant in college because of just how wide the hash marks and everything are there. So what you have in Bo Nix is a player who is historically accurate, most accurate quarterback in NCAA history this past year. He was second among the top quarterbacks in yards per game. He was second in EPA. He had the lowest sack rate among the quarterbacks, one of the lowest pressure to sack rates, and he had the third highest completion percentage on deep passes, even though he didn't attempt all that many of them, and the second highest on target rate for deep passes. So the guy who could throw that ball all over the yard is still in there, but it's been tempered, and it's been tempered in a way that makes him much more dependable, much more efficient on a down-to-down basis. And to me, that is one of the things that kind of gets lost when we talk about guys like Caleb or Drake May, or even to a certain extent, Michael Penix, is the down-to-down efficiency, just not hurting your offense, not hurting your team by taking what the defense gives you. Keep the offense on the field, keep the ball moving forwards, and then you take your shot when the time is right, as opposed to just going big play hunting and then wind up in third and long because your 25-yard pass attempt on first down didn't work. Kind of a situation. So, like, I don't believe that Bo Nix's ceiling is as high as some of the other guys, but I think he has a higher than mediocre floor, and I think he could be a guy kind of like Dak Prescott, like Jalen Hurts, where they had the year-over-year improvement as a passer and the growth in the mental aspect of the game. And then all of a sudden, people kind of overlook them in the draft, and then they get into an NFL system and they are suddenly successful. You know, like, I remember in 2020, I should say, the 2020 draft, 2019 season, Charlie Casserly had Justin Herbert out of the first round entirely. And Pro Football Focus, one of their analysts, went on the record saying, I just don't think Justin Herbert can play. I think he's going to be a bust. And then we see a lot of the same things about Bo Nix. And I think some of it is helmet scouting and just not looking for, like we talked about with JJ McCarthy, the NFL throws within all the other stuff. Okay, pillory away.
Nick, Tony, I'm gonna let you guys talk about Nix. I mean, I have a hard time with that at 12, I guess. Because of the ceiling.
Yeah, I'm there with Ed. I have a hard time selecting Bo Nix at 12 because of ceiling, but I think Chris also has a point that I don't know if it's helmet scouting, but it is people just saying this guy's been around forever. He sucks. You shouldn't take him. I think if you want to take a risk on day 2, or risk, if you want to even quantify it like that, if you want to select a quarterback on day 2 who can do everything that Chris just said, I think Bo Nix does that. I just do think there is a ceiling. So I don't see a huge NFL arm, but he can run a rhythmic, well-timed type of passing attack because he is smart. He is intelligent. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but I feel like he carries his weight very well. So I watched his tape about 2 weeks ago, and I finished his evaluation, and I came away saying this is a potential starter, somebody who probably could start in the right system. But if you're telling me the Giants trade back and then they select him at 12 or 11 or wherever the Giants trade back to, I probably wouldn't be overly enthused with that pick because I think there is a cap on the ceiling.
And I do have to say, my rationale for trading back instead of trading up is that the Giants do have needs. And if you are trading up and you are not getting that home run, the guy who could be a top 7, top 5 quarterback, then you don't want to potentially give up future assets to get them. And I also tend to look at next year's draft class this year, not all the time, but just with this year. I think the reason why we're seeing all the talk of the Vikings trading up into the top 5, the Denver Broncos, the Raiders trading up into the top 5 is looking ahead to next year. It isn't nearly as sure as this year. You know, like for the Giants specifically, they're not going to draft Shedeur Sanders. Nothing against the kid, but they're not bringing in Coach Prime's son. And
Not happening.
Yeah, no. And I just sitting here now, I can't say that Jalen Milroe at Alabama, Carson Beck at Georgia, Quinn Ewers in Texas, Brady Cook in Missouri. I can't sit here and say those guys are going to develop and be as good as any of the top 6 quarterbacks in this year's draft class. And I don't know that any of the NFL teams are going to be able to look there and say, yeah, we're fine waiting on one of those guys who may or may not even declare.
I think that's a good point, but real quick on that, Jaden Daniels, no one was talking about last year at this time. JJ McCarthy, no one was talking about last year at this time. Like, I understand in theory, like, why people do that, but I always, like, Joe Burrow, no one was talking about him before the 2019 season. There's just so much that has to happen where you want to have a blueprint as to, like, what the future looks like, but I wouldn't I wouldn't put so many eggs in that basket.
Yeah. The flip side of that is people were talking about Will Levis this time last year, and widely
second overall they were talking about.
Yeah.
Second overall. I think he was the betting favorite for that.
Yeah. As the next Josh Allen, and he never took that step. So like it goes both ways. And I think the not being sure about next year, when you have a good quarterback draft this year, that is context to keep in mind. And I think the other front offices have that in mind as well.
And
Tony?
if I could just throw a couple of other things in there, talking about last year, and you think about what happened with the quarterback draft last year. So Nick mentioned Will Levis, who people thought was going to go in the top 10, dropping down to the beginning of the second round, I guess it was. He finally went. But you think about the guy who went in the opposite direction was Anthony Richardson. Not to make a comparison between Anthony Richardson and Bo Nix. Those two very, very different kinds of quarterbacks and skill set. But Anthony Richardson was considered this, amazingly physically talented guy who still had to learn how to play quarterback. And he kind of started out the draft period being or the lead up to the draft being imagined as somebody who might go late first round or something like that. And then I think by the time we got to draft day, people were thinking he might make it into the beginning of the top 10. And then he winds up actually going at number 4. And then fast forward to the season, and well, he looked pretty interesting in those first few games before what everybody feared about Anthony Richardson happened, that he got hurt multiple times, finally was out for the season. And that's kind of, the type of guy he is, but he looked amazingly talented on an NFL field those first few games. And so you can kind of understand why Indianapolis was willing to take him as high as number 4. And again, Bo Nix is a very different kind of quarterback, but isn't getting any of the buzz, I think, that someone like Richardson was getting. But again, I don't watch all 22, but I did, read Matt Waldman's analysis of Bo Nix. And one of the things that Matt Waldman does is nice is that he gives you links to about half a dozen clips at the end of his evaluations of all the quarterbacks, so you can watch individual plays where he tries to illustrate things. And what you see if you go through his clips on Bo Nix is that you never see a wow play. And I think that's part of the problem with Bo Nix, is that in that offense, there maybe are not a lot of wow plays to be had. But what he shows, and I assume that he thinks that these are representative, is that he sees a guy making a lot of good decisions with the ball. And he even shows highlights of him, not going for a throw that would be a wow play when that throw is likely not to be completed, and taking something safer instead. And you'd say, well, you shouldn't show that as a highlight. But I think he's trying to highlight the fact that he makes good decisions, that he does process the field fairly well, and goes to second and third options. And so, again, if people who know more than I do, and presumably people in the Giants organization know more than I do about evaluating quarterbacks, think that he's worth it, then taking a flyer at 11 or 12 or something like that via trade down, I'd swallow hard if they took him that high. But I'd also say, okay, they must see something that they think they can make work. And oh, by the way, if they traded down, there'll be those extra picks there, and we'll be getting assets that we need on this team. And so again, the question is, if you don't take him, you let him go by, and you go into this season with no new quarterback, or just some late round flyer on a Pratt or a Milton, or whoever, where do you really stand going into next year? And so it's hard for me to believe they're not going to try to come out of this draft with a quarterback fairly high in the draft, whether that's round 1 or 2. I mean, I guess I'd even be okay if they went Rattler, if they thought that they saw something in Rattler they could develop. But again, it's the farther down you get, the more you swallow hard when that's the pick that they make.
All right, I wanted to, we're almost an hour and a half in, guys, and we haven't talked about Spencer Rattler or Michael Penix, and I kind of want to wrap up with talking about those two guys. I will quickly tell you, there's a lot to, my opinion, there's a lot to like about Michael Penix. For a guy who was talked about as being this incredibly accurate passer, when I watch Michael Penix, I see an awful lot of what I would call layup throws that get missed, too many layup throws that get missed. And that bothers me. The injury history bothers me, because I have a hard time with the Giants saying one of the reasons we're moving on from Daniel Jones is the injury concerns, and replacing Daniel Jones with Michael Penix, who's had 2 ACLs and had 2 seasons end because of shoulder injuries. I have a hard time with that. I do see the ability. Spencer Rattler is a guy who, my own 2 cents is, if the 6 guys are gone, to me, Spencer Rattler's the last guy who has real starting potential. That, real start. Now, I don't know what the upside of that is, but to me, he's the last guy, that I might take on the first 2 days of the draft and say, he at least gives us an option. He might at least give us an option if we see what we think we're going to see, when it comes to 2025. So just real quickly, just your guys' thoughts on both of those players.
I'll be real quick with this. I agree with your assessment, Ed, on Penix, and and Rattler. With Penix, I'll say this. I appreciate how he can access every inch of the field with his arm. I do think there is some inaccuracies that would need to be ironed out. He didn't face a lot of pressure, and there were times where I felt like he should have been better against pressure, but at the same time, he's very good at getting rid of the football when pressure is incoming. So kind of evaluating his ability to play against pressure is interesting, but I just think it's going to be such a more difficult transition into the NFL because he's not going to have this Washington offense, this wide open Washington offense. He's not going to have three, probably what I would say top 100 wide receivers at his disposal relative to the rest of the competition that he's going up against. Right. So, I have my reservations. If you're talking about day 2, I can easily be talked into it. There's rumors about like him at 6, and that I would not love. He's 4 years old. He has all these injuries. So that's my thing on Michael Penix Jr. With Spencer Rattler, right there with you. Hey, if you want a day 2, 3rd round kind of, I don't want to say punt, but a developmental option who can come in and be a really good backup, which we know Joe Shane is looking for too. And also with the potential of being a starter. There's still a lot of meat on the bones of development there. I think he navigates the pocket really well. I think he has a better arm than he's given credit for. Not the best athlete, not the biggest guy. So there are some drawbacks, but you're talking about pick 70. Yeah, Spencer Rattler, if you want to go in that direction, I won't hate it, I don't think.
All right. Yeah, with Penix, the injuries with him scare me more than anything. The 2 ACLs I worry about, like with Kenny Phillips, a degenerative condition setting in, and that just putting a hard limit on his career, and you might get 6 years out of him before he's, running like a young Tom Brady. The inaccuracies, I think Nick nailed that one with, he is fantastic at getting rid of the ball when under pressure. He has a microscopic sack rate, pressure to sack rate, which also kind of makes the injuries more concerning, that he doesn't take many hits, but has still had 4 season-ending injuries. That is a little concerning. But also when he does get pressured and he has to get moved off of his spot, that's what I think when you see the layup throws get missed, things that really should be caught or should be delivered on target, those go awry. However, like Nick said, like he is a fantastic thrower of the ball. I don't love his throwing motion, but I also didn't love Phillip Rivers' throwing motion either. That it works for him, so fine. I'd like to see a little bit higher trajectory just to deal with the batted passes or limit the batted passes, but whatever. For me, it's just if he's going to get pressured, and he's going to get pressured in the NFL, I'd like to see him maintain his accuracy under pressure. Throw the ball away, make good decisions, don't take hits. Yes, but sometimes, like I said before, talking about JJ McCarthy, sometimes there's a free runner that is the quarterback's responsibility. And I'd like to see Penix deal with that better. Now with Spencer Rattler, that would give me indigestion, something horrible. He scares me. He scares me a lot because he has taken more sacks every year since leaving Oklahoma, or starting in Oklahoma and getting benched, going to South Carolina. He does have a great arm. He has a very Caleb Williams-like arm, very elastic, great strength. He can throw on the run. He can make incredible throws on the run, and he couldn't have handed the ball to the receiver any better, just sprinting out the opposite direction. But then there's other plays where he is just completely unpressured and throws the ball 2 yards behind his receiver. I saw him overthrow Nick Harbor, and we haven't been talking about Nick Harbor yet because he was a true freshman, but he was a true freshman who was at the top of Bruce Feldman's freaks list. He's got Mike Evans' size. He's going to be another Calvin Johnson, assuming he develops as a receiver. But that's just the kind of athlete that he is. And Rattler overthrew him on tape. It's just the down-to-down consistency with Rattler, and sometimes the decision-making, not recognizing pressure, bailing from stable pockets. Rattler feels to me like a guy who is good enough to get you fired, like good enough to make you believe that he can be developed into something and then never take a step. And having enough wow plays out there that you keep trying and then you fail or he fails and you get fired.
Tony,
Yeah,
you have anything?
I basically agree with what Nick and Chris are saying about these two quarterbacks. And as far as Penix goes, I mean, as I say, you know, it's a strange throwing motion. Yeah, as you say, left-handed Phillip Rivers. It's weird to watch him throw the ball. But I mean, he throws a beautiful ball, but he does have some accuracy problems, and he benefited from having guys like Odunze and Polk there to catch the ball for him. Also, the other thing, and this I guess applies to Knicks too, is I think they both benefited from playing most of their games against Pac-12 defenses, and the Pac-12 is not great defense this year. And then coming back to JJ McCarthy was spending most of his season passing against those defenses, and they had a lot of the best defenses in the country too that they faced. So that factors into I think all of the evaluations. But I'm not as low as Penix as I think some people are. If the Giants got him, I'd be intrigued with that. Not at number 6, definitely. But if we're talking about a trade down to number 11 or 12 or something like that, I'd say okay with that too. They'd better make sure they've got the right tackle position shored up if they do go for a left-handed quarterback. And so that's another concern. But I mean, he looks like a talented quarterback. If he winds up being successful in the NFL, it won't shock me. But if he crashes and burns in the NFL, that won't shock me either. And as far as Rattler goes, I mean, Rattler I have to admit, I haven't seen Rattler much at all. But what little I've seen of him, he just strikes me as a guy who has a decent amount of talent, but he doesn't have as much talent as he thinks he has. And so he tries things maybe that he shouldn't try. He thinks he's going to be able to create something that he's not able to create, and he gets himself in trouble too often. And that maybe as much as anything, you'd have to get him out of some of his bad habits and bad decision making on plays if he was going to have a chance to be successful in the NFL. Again, if you haven't gotten anyone on day 1 or day 2 or round 2, and round 3 is rolling around, you want to take a flyer on him at pick 70. Okay. But I don't think you can expect that that's going to be your solution to the quarterback problem. So you're doing it more as a flyer than anything else, I think.
All right, guys. Unless you guys have anything else to add, I think an hour and a half. I think we've gone quite far enough. I think this has been fascinating. Fingers crossed that Joe Shane's been sitting in his office listening to all of this and trying to let us help him figure out what to do tonight. So, Joe, if you've been listening, we got it all figured out for you. We hope.
You can.
It's not like he has anything better to do.
No, you can actually make a transcript out of a YouTube video. So maybe I'll just fire that off to the Giants offices. Here's all the answers for you guys. Just follow the script, follow our big board. You're all set. Guys, thanks a lot for this. It was fun. It was educational. Hopefully listeners, viewers enjoyed it. Please remember to subscribe to the Big Blue View YouTube channel if you haven't done that already. And thanks as always for listening. Stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.